Matthew 10:34. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a person's enemies will be those of his own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life with that, whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. You take your cross, in other words, it's your cross to bear. You admit your sins, you admit your faults, and you carry them. You admit them, you don't hide them from anyone, anywhere. They are your sins. And to repent is to own them and change your ways. In Matthew 10:34-36, Jesus states he came not to bring peace but a sword, meaning his message causes division, forcing a choice between following him or the world. This metaphorical sword signifies the conflict and sometimes familial strife that arises when faith in Christ clashes with existing societal or personal values. Metaphor for division. The sword represents the dividing line between believers and non-believers, causing conflict rather than universal peace. Familial conflict. Jesus explains that his arrival sets family members against one another. Example, child against parent, when some accept his teachings and others reject him. Cost of discipline. Cost of discipleship. Now think about the word disciple. The disciples were very disciplined. Discipleship was being disciplined in Christ. Excuse me. It highlights that following Jesus may bring persecution, challenges, and the need to prioritise faith over earthly, personal, and family loyalties. Not physical violence. Scholars generally agree this is not a call to literal violent warfare, as Jesus taught to love enemies and Peter was told to put away his sword. Contextual meaning. The verse is part of a broader instruction to his disciples about the challenges they would face. Matthew 10:34-39. It emphasises that true peace with God often comes at the cost of immediate peace on earth. Jesus also did say that a time would come that he who has no sword and owns a cloak to sell his cloak to buy a sword, and he who has two cloaks to buy two. One sword for someone who has neither. But to keep your sword sheathed, it's only there to defend yourself, and that is it. Thou shalt not do murder. Doesn't say thou shalt not kill. If someone's going to murder you and they die in the process because they tried to murder you, so be it. You can't be responsible for that. Because how can you honour that father by being a dead father, by not defending your family, not defending God's children? So there is a line that can be crossed. They're not meant to be dead set jellybacks.
Australia's debt is about to cross $1 trillion for the first time in history. This is big. And recent evidence that has come to light shows this was not some innocent accounting mistake. This was not, oops, inflation happened. This was a chain of big, reckless financial decisions, blunders, cover-ups, redactions, money being thrown around like it was monopoly cash. Some of the issues are even linked to corruption scandals and serious misconduct. Hey guys, it's Scott here. Now, you've probably seen the headlines everywhere. Jim Chalmers is about to hand down the May budget. Before he even stands up to speak, Australia will have smashed through the $1 trillion in debt.
Look how he laughs. He knows he sold us out and he's laughing about it. If that's not just a demonic, I don't know what is.
Mark. And you might think, okay, that's terrible. Maybe they just miscalculated. Maybe the economy turned. Maybe it was just bad luck. Absolutely not. When you actually piece together what's been coming out over the last few months, scattered across different news articles, different reviews, it paints a picture that is honestly shocking. This debt did not just happen. It has been cooking for years. One reckless move after another, one secret after another.
But it's not surprising, Deputy Speaker, that Labor members would defend the disgraceful action of union members abusing local people on social media. Well, why wouldn't they defend them? When they've taken $15 billion, when $15 billion goes missing from big build sites, primarily to bikie gangs via the CFMEU, when the Labor government goes quiet, says there's no problem, no inquiry, no need for a royal commission because this government is corrupt.
Now, because there are independent reviews, parliamentary pressure, and internal leaks, the truth is just starting to come to the surface now, and what's coming out is truly ugly. I have never seen a government make these kinds of financial decisions and still stand there pretending everything is fine. Some of this stuff is borderline criminal. So in this video, I'm going to break it down in plain English. No jargon, no fluff, just the backstory, the parts they hoped you wouldn't connect, the decisions that led us straight to 1 trillion, because when you see it piece by piece, you'll realize this was predictable. I've done all the research and pulled it all together right here so that you don't have to. I do property and economy every single day, so hit the bell icon and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Okay, so let's start with the first punch in the gut. Before we even talk about 1 trillion, we need to talk about the $54 billion budget blowout that only came out because the government was pressured in Parliament. Think about that. Treasury was asked about the medium-term budget position. They couldn't give a clear number. They were pushed, forced to go back and run the numbers. Then they came back and said, oh, by the way, it's actually 54 billion. 54 billion. Let's be clear, when the government spends more than it earns, that gap becomes a deficit. And when you run a deficit, you borrow money. And when you borrow year after year, that becomes debt. So a blowout today is a bigger debt tomorrow. This is Finance 101. And what made it worse was the messaging. Jim Chalmers initially tried to downplay it, suggested it was about low income for the government, they weren't collecting enough money. Then Treasury officials said no, that is not the case. It was actually bigger government spending. So what is it? Is it less revenue or is it government spending? Because when you're handling almost $1 trillion of other people's money, you don't get to shrug and guess. Australians pay some of the highest taxes in the developed world. If you're going to tax people that hard, at least have your numbers straight. At least be transparent. And this is just the first layer, because the deeper you go, the uglier it gets.
The Treasurer has spent years dishonestly claiming others had hit this milestone, and yet in truth it is going to happen on his watch. Will the Treasurer confirm that, for the very first time in Australia's history, Australia's debt will soon hit $1 trillion?
Kind of you to refer to him as the Deputy Leader, Mr. Speaker. But now it is, yeah. Now it is.
Members on my right, can everyone just please show some respect into this chamber? It's absolutely ridiculous.
Now, I've never met an Australian that doesn't mind paying taxes. What most Aussies want to know is that their tax money is being spent appropriately and for the greater good. Now, the agency managing the debt is under review. Now let's talk about the Australian Office of Financial Management, the AOFM. These are the people who actually raise the money. They issue the bonds, they manage the debt portfolio, they're supposed to make sure we borrow at the lowest cost possible. This is the engine room, and right now that engine room is under independent review by former RBA Deputy Governor Guy Debelle. Why? Because nearly half the staff have left or been made redundant over the past year. Morale is reportedly low. Internal dissatisfaction is high. And in public service survey data, a notable percent of staff said they had observed conduct they consider corrupt. Let that sink in. This is the agency managing almost $1 trillion, and it's being reviewed for structure, governance, and capability at the exact moment our debt is exploding. You cannot make this up. If this was a private company managing your super fund, you would be demanding that heads roll. But we're just told it's normal. Well, guys, it is not normal, and this needs the spotlight shined directly upon it. Now, this is the part that made me furious. It's a little technical, so stay with me here. I'm going to keep this as simple as I can. Now, the government has been borrowing long-term at close to 5% interest. At the same time, that large chunk of borrowed cash has been sitting at the Reserve Bank, earning less than that. So in plain English, they're borrowing at a higher rate and earning a lower rate on the same pool of money. If you borrowed $100 at 5%, you'd owe $5 in interest. If you parked that $100 at 3%, you'd earn $3. You're actually down $2. Now, someone might say, why borrow money to store it and not immediately invest it into something productive? Governments do so to keep cash reserves to pay bills and handle market shocks. The issue is scale. If you need $100, you borrow $100, you accept a small loss and move on. But under the current strategy, the government has been borrowing much more than needed and holding very large cash balances. So instead of borrowing $100 and losing $2, it's like borrowing $1,000, a bigger pool of money, and taking a much larger hit. Now multiply that across tens of billions of dollars. The estimated extra cost under the strategy is more than $200 million a year. And when you're already heading toward $1 trillion in debt, that choice absolutely matters. Okay, so let's zoom out for a moment. It's not only about the size of the debt, but also at the rate it is growing. Australia's gross government debt has gone from around 9.6% of GDP in 2007 to about, now wait for it, 49.8% in 2024. That's roughly a 418% increase. Let's compare that to some similar countries. Now, UK debt grew by about 135% over the same period. US debt grew by around 87%. Canada has around 73% debt growth. Yes, other countries have more total debt, but the growth rate of our debt has been so extreme. It has become so extreme that international institutions have started warning Australia to get its debt trajectory under control. We are no longer in the low debt, safe buffer category, which Australia has been for years. We are now in moderate territory. The responsible moment to stop is now. We need to turn it around right now. But wait, it doesn't end here. There is another layer to it. Interest costs. Australia is paying around $2 billion per month in interest. That could hit $3 billion per month later this decade. That's money that doesn't build a hospital, doesn't fix a road, doesn't reduce your tax bill. It means your tax bill needs to go up. This money goes just to service debt. Debt itself is not automatically bad. Big companies carry debt all the time. The key question is simple. Is your income growing faster than your interest bill? Think of your own household for a moment. If your salary is rising 7% a year and your mortgage costs 5%, you're fine. Your income outruns the interest. But if your mortgage costs are climbing at 5% and your income is growing at 2%, you are squeezed, your household is squeezed. The debt starts eating your future. That's the danger here. Australia's productivity growth has been weak. Economic growth has slowed down. Yet interest costs are climbing. When interest costs start rising faster than your economic growth, debt starts becoming extremely heavy. At that point, the government only has two levers left. It can, 1, cut spending, or 2, raise taxes. And given what we've seen so far, which one do you honestly think they will choose? And just remember, it is middle Australia, it is the hardest working Australians that will get hit with the biggest tax increases. So who's going to pay for this? You will. Now here's the part no one likes to say out loud. When debt rises and deficits blow out, the government has the two choices: cut spending or raise revenue, or in other words, raise taxes. Let's be honest, they rarely choose the first one. So where does the revenue come from? Where does the extra cash come from? It comes from you, your salary, your investments. We've already seen fuel taxes jump back up. Excise rises and cost of living pressures stack up. And this is happening while Australian households already have the second highest household debt levels in the world. So think about the insanity of this. Households are heavily indebted. The government is racing toward $1 trillion in debt. Interest bills are rising. Productivity in this country is extremely weak, and we are supposed to believe that all of this is fine. Well, no, it absolutely is not. This is not one bad year. This is a pattern which has been going on for multiple years. And when you connect all of the dots, 1 trillion doesn't look like a surprise, it looks inevitable. The question is whether anyone is actually going to be held accountable for this, change this, before the bill lands on you, and that will be announced at the May budget. Let's see what they do. Because when governments run out of room, they don't downsize, they're going to reach into your pocket by increased taxes. So this is where we are. Will anyone take responsibility? Will spending finally be controlled? Will growth actually be fixed? Or will we just keep drifting until the next ugly milestone? You deserve to understand what is happening with your country's money. You deserve transparency, and you deserve leadership that treats $1 trillion like it matters, because it does. This was your daily property update. A break.
Inception. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth passes away, not an iota, not a dot, will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven, but whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So, we will all be loved equal in heaven, but there are different levels of heaven, obviously. We can all be saved, but at different levels. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. The scribes, the people that were trying to mess with God's law. Woe for they worship me in vain. They speak of me with their lips, but yet teach the commandments of men as doctrine. That's the difference between legislation and law. No, legislation is not law. Sorry to say. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth, is found in Matthew 5:5, part of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes. This verse promises that those who are gentle, humble, and possess self-controlled strength rather than passivity will receive the earth as a reward from God. That's the 1,000-year reign of God. Key aspects of Matthew 5:5. Definition of meekness. In the original Greek, meek signifies strength under control. Similar to a trained horse, it means having power but not using it for selfish gain, being submissive to God and avoiding vengeance. The reward. The promise to inherit the earth suggests that God's faithful, humble servants will inherit the new earth, reflecting both a present spiritual reality and a future eternal divine blessing. Context. It is the third beatitude in Matthew 5:3-12, which turns conventional ideas of power upside down. Biblical roots. This verse is a direct reference to Psalm 37, chapter 37, verse 11. But the meek shall inherit the land and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. The phrase emphasizes that the earth belongs to God and he bestows it upon those who trust in him rather than those who tried to seize it by force. What do you reckon's going on at the moment? We're being divided. The righteous and the not righteous. The greedy pigs and the meek. Okay, you don't believe that? Why is it that the greedy pigs are trying to upload themselves into a digital world? And they know what's coming. Your technocratic overlords aren't being exactly honest with you, I'm afraid. They're telling you porky pies. If it's not real, okay, then I'm cuckoo. But they're twice as cuckoo, because I'm not going out of my way of spending trillions of dollars to try and hide underground in bunkers and upload my consciousness into a data platform. Just saying, that should be red flags all over the place if you have a mind capable of any critical thought whatsoever. I don't mean that to be nasty. Like I always say, I say to people a lot, and I find myself saying it to the cops all the time. Okay, now I could be wrong and you could be right, and what have I got to lose? Nothing. Well, I could be right and you could be wrong. Now, what have I got to lose? Nothing. I've got everything to gain. Now, if I am right and you're wrong, you got a hell of a lot to worry about. Literally. Hell of a lot. I'll go away. What's going on here?
This is Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia. 3 nations spread across 3 different continents. But despite the distance, one alarming truth connects them all. They are collapsing in exactly the same way. And now, the symptoms are impossible to ignore. Let's begin where the cracks are turning into a full-blown collapse. Canada. In Canada today, the average family can't afford a home in their own country. Home ownership has crashed 31% in a single generation. Compounding this issue, foreign buyers now hold a significant stake in the Canadian property market, owning up to 13% of it, more than at any point in history. But Canada isn't alone. In Britain, the foundation of the middle class has been gutted. Manufacturing jobs gone, down 46% since 1990. And what did families get in return? The highest tax burden since World War II. All while public services fell apart. But this isn't just a British problem. Across the world, Australia is living the same nightmare, only deeper. There, a quiet takeover is underway. Foreign corporations now control 80% of the country's critical resources. And the dream of home ownership? Dead on arrival. Housing prices have soared by 500%, while wages crawled just 80%. Young Australians are being priced out of their future in their own country. And this pattern across continents, across governments, is no accident. This isn't just failure. It's not bad luck. It's called managed decline. It's happening by design. And if you're watching this thinking it can't happen here, you need to pay attention. Because these 3 nations are the test cases for what's already occurring throughout the Western world. What you're about to learn in this video will completely change how you understand what's happening to these once powerful nations, and why everyone should be deeply concerned about what comes next. The evidence is hiding in plain sight. Government documents, insider testimonies, and statistical patterns reveal a blueprint that's been quietly unfolding for decades. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Most people have no idea that the collapse of these 3 nations follows a familiar historical pattern. Every empire throughout history has fallen in a similar way, from the inside out. Take ancient Rome. Most think it fell to barbarian invasions, but Rome's real decline began internally, through economic inequality that mirror what's happening across Canada, the UK, and Australia right now. By the 2nd century AD, as Rome's expansion slowed, the wealthy elite created massive estates worked by imported labor. This destroyed local Roman farmers, the backbone of the Republic, who were crushed by debt and displacement. Sound familiar? It should. It's the exact same pattern unfolding today. When Roman reformers tried addressing these inequalities, they were eliminated. The elites chose to get rid of reformers rather than give up their power. A key point to remember as we look at what's happening in these modern nations. Just as Rome faced demographic collapse in its final years, these three nations are experiencing unprecedented population shifts. Despite Canada importing over 480,000 migrants in 2024 alone, its fertility rate has plummeted to just 1.48 children per woman, far below the replacement level. The UK's fertility rate has crashed to 1.44, while Australia's sits at 1.5. These countries aren't growing naturally. They're being artificially repopulated while their middle classes vanish, exactly as Rome's did before its fall. Managed decline might sound like boring corporate jargon, but it represents one of the most dangerous concepts in modern governance. Originally a business term for companies beyond saving, it evolved into a...
Now, I just came out and, yeah, I've heard this once before already. Now, talking about populations, yeah? There's another thing that should be blowing whistles. I think it's 2/3 or something. 2/3 of the world's population can't go to heaven because they're not righteous. But it has to be the right number of righteous versus unrighteous as well. There's a bit of a numbers game going on there. Why do you think they keep inventing weirdo religions and stuff? It's not meant to be religion. Jesus came the first time was to put an end to religion and the Pharisees and the false teachings and the scribes. They do strange things, like they have birth limits, like in China, 1 child per family for ages. If they only had 1 child per family for so many years, which they did, why do they have such a huge population? That doesn't, the math not be mathing, eh? They keep corrupting people and then keep sending people up on weird religious tangents. So we never have the right ratio. We must be somewhere around the right ratio at the moment, because now they're scrambling to try and hide. They're trying to Noah hide behind the wrong rainbow. 2 rainbows. Not the one that everybody thinks was God's promise. Wrong rainbow. I believe it's Aurora Borealis and Aurora Australis. And then you got the fake one, which is a heart machine. It's just a dead, boring aurora that doesn't move, it doesn't do anything. It just sits there and glows, all boring like. It doesn't wait around. Doesn't have the tabernacle floating around in it either, or doves. Dove shapes. I think what's right, I don't really care. Do you know the Church of Latter-day Saints and Jesus Christ and Seventh-day Adventists and Mormons are all based on Luciferianism? With a little G.
A strategy where maintaining appearances takes priority over actual solutions. This isn't conspiracy theory, it's documented policy. The concept emerged during the 1980s in Britain when Margaret Thatcher's government advised that struggling industrial cities should be left to manage decline, controlling the collapse rather than preventing it. But what's truly shocking? This localized strategy has now been scaled up to the national level across Canada, the UK, and Australia, and the evidence isn't hidden. It's being announced openly. Don't believe it? Just look at the official messaging coming out of these governments. Their infamous "you'll own nothing and be happy" rhetoric wasn't just a meme. It's becoming the reality for millions. In Australia, government reports warn of a generation of forever renters as home ownership slips out of reach for younger Australians. In Canada, nearly a third of people under 40 now say they expect to rent for life, according to recent surveys. And in the UK, a 2025 policy paper declared that the era of mass home ownership is over, signaling a long-term shift away from traditional property ownership. If this is your first time hearing about managed decline, prepare for a rude awakening, because once you understand how it works, you'll start seeing it everywhere. And nowhere is it more obvious than what's happening to Canada right now. Canada presents itself as a progressive, independent nation. The reality? It's being transformed back into a resource colony before our very eyes. Here's the playbook being implemented with frightening precision. First, domestic production gets strangled. Since 2009, business investment per worker in Canada has fallen by 20%, according to Statistics Canada, part of a broader trend tied to weaker market competition. Meanwhile, productivity has stagnated. Canada also recorded only 1.1% growth in real GDP per capita between 2014 and 2024, making it the second worst performer among 38 high-income countries. Second, the market gets flooded with new consumers. Canada now has the highest population growth in the G7, with 98% coming from immigration. This creates artificial GDP growth on paper while masking collapsing living standards. Meanwhile, the housing market has detached completely from economic reality. The average Toronto home now costs 11 times the median household income, more than double what financial experts consider remotely sustainable. Young Canadians aren't just unable to buy homes, they're spending up to 60% of their income on rent alone. The numbers are staggering. In March 2025, the average home price in Toronto hit $1.4 million, while Vancouver topped $1.7 million. Meanwhile, the median annual income in these cities hovers around $100,000.
Have you ever wondered why? Excuse me. When you talk about when the Eastern nations, the global North, you got the global East, the global West, whatever, the economic West. Whenever the East, Middle East talks about themselves, referring to themselves, they talk about themselves, the Arab nations, the Eastern nations, or the Middle Eastern nations. And talk about themselves just as straight up Iran or Iraq or Pakistan or United Arab Emirates, like Libya, going right through Russia, all the BRICS nations. They talk about themselves as a collective. But we refer to ourselves just as our country. The problem in Australia, the problem in America, the problem in Great Britain, the problem in Ireland. Not as a collective. Because it keeps us self-absorbed and focused on our own little area, but divided within our own country, and we're all just running around like chooks with our heads cut off, not realising that it's a whole game plan and across the entire West being played, all in lockstep, as a unilateral agreement. Unilateral? No, trilateral. You think about the Trilateral Committee. You got the Americana, Britannica, Australis, and now they've come full circle. They're trying to go back to the East again. It's Rome, it's always been Rome, it's the Roman senators, it's the plan. Now they're trying to use, there was Pax Britannica, which was, when Britain was the main world currency. Pax Americana, the main currency is the American dollar. Now we're going Pax Judea. Pax Judea. Pax Judaica. It's always been the Zionist Jewish movement that's controlled all the money moving around. Now they're just going to own it under Judaism. Pax Judah. Get your head round it. Pax Judea. So they want to control the world's currency. The Canaanites. Yeah, this is not Israel. Put that leg up there on this
The math simply doesn't work anymore. And who's buying these properties? Foreign investors purchased tens of thousands of Canadian homes in recent years, with many left empty as pure investment vehicles. In fact, things got so bad that the federal government extended its foreign buyer ban to 2027.
But you still think the arse dropping out of the property market and the unions? Right. How does those two work together? The arse drops out of the property market. The unions get dismantled. The CFMEU used to be the Builders and Labourers Union. They don't have a leg to stand on. So if the property market collapses, the building industry collapses. For most of the building industry, except for those who have got their heads stuck right up the government's arse. Who's got their head stuck right up Pauline's arse at the moment? Scott Challen. What does he do for a living? He's a builder. He owns a building company. You seeing how that works? He's feathering his nest. He's not doing anything for you. He's making you take yourselves to hell in a handbasket. What do you think? What do you think all the COVID detention centres were actually built for that never really got used, and they're now all in private ownership? Sold for cents on the dollar. There's ones that never even got used. Anastasia Palaszczuk. Right? Who's going to stay in those? Well, I'll guarantee you that there will be military police coming from overseas that will stay in some of them. As things get more hectic, they're going to need more police. But trying to get police to go against our constitution and against our people, they're going to have to get police in from somewhere else, because at some point shortly they're going to run out of Australian police that will be willing to shoot Australian people, and they now have long rifles with live hollow point rounds. That's shoot to kill stuff, like not even to maim. That's most damage, minimum rounds. That's what that is. You don't go deer shooting with a 22. You go deer shooting with a larger caliber rifle, at least a 223. Now, if you want to do maximum damage, use a hollow point or a cross point. Something that spreads and fragments. So it hits, and then it just fragments inside and goes in all directions. Or a hollow point that squishes and spreads, so as it goes through, the hole gets bigger. That's why they have such a large exit wound.
Statistics Canada data shows that non-residents owned about 7% of condos in British Columbia and 5.6% in Ontario.
Which is why they're egging everyone up. You get wound up, real wound up. But we can't shoot back now, can we? Not that I would recommend that anyway. That's a fool's errand. We will run. No, they'll just wait us out. They'll just send the pawns out. You know, kind of like how they sent Kevin Smith to that fella's door here not long ago. What was it, up North Mountain, wherever it is, the professional shooter, and sent him up by himself. Because if there was ever a copper that would roll over on the dirty, crooked cops, which he was probably, I could see that he was getting to an age where he was probably starting to become a bit of a risk of liability to their little corrupt games. I don't care what you say. I think he was murdered by his own people. They sent him up there knowing that was going to happen. Why did everyone else hang back? And sent him up to knock on the door of a man with schizophrenia, with heaps of firearms, that was wound up to fuckery, to seize his house off him, without even so much as a bulletproof vest on. But yet there was a tactical team waiting at the bottom of the driveway. Come on.
Clear evidence that investment demand has distorted housing supply. But wait, you might be thinking, isn't this just normal economic evolution? Think again. Most Canadians never even noticed when, back in 2015, former Prime Minister Stephen Harper publicly dismissed the middle-class prosperity platform as outdated. At the time, it sounded like political posturing, but in hindsight, it reads more like a warning, because what followed was a slow, calculated dismantling of the economic foundations that once upheld middle-class life in Canada. But here's the truly mind-blowing part. Canadian policymakers aren't failing to solve these problems. They're just ignoring the inevitable. When asked what happens if Canada's housing bubble finally bursts, analysts warned that it could trigger a financial crisis with ripple effects far beyond real estate. As Jacobin notes, Canada's housing market has become a tinderbox propped up by speculation, lax regulation, and blind faith in endless appreciation. If the bubble pops, it won't be a surprise. It'll be a disaster foretold. That's right. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. If you think Canada's managed decline is shocking, just wait until you see what they've done to Britain. It's the same blueprint, just a more advanced stage. And what you're about to discover will make you question everything you thought you knew about modern economics.
That's how we roll.
The United Kingdom, once the workshop of the world and birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, is now experiencing the fastest deindustrialization of any developed nation.
Welcome to I Am the White Rabbit. My name is Nicola Charles. It's Wednesday, the 18th of February 2026. Today's show, we may as well call it Managed Decline. We know that's what they're doing. And as was said there in that clip, that what our governments are doing is actually sort of maintaining an appearance, or they think that they're maintaining the appearance that everything's running smoothly, and, you know, we just need to bring building costs down, is what Angus Taylor, the new so-called leader of the so-called Liberal Party, the so-called opposition, said in his first television outing. Okay then, I don't think bringing down building costs is going to cover up what you've done. Our nations have been de-industrialized, right? This is what the fourth industrial revolution, the Great Reset, was about. And what they've done is they've taken our money overseas and they're going to industrialize other countries, because essentially we've been harvested as a resource. We, the domestic populations in our countries, have been harvested. And what happened is we got to a point where, well, we weren't really working class anymore. We were middle class, because, God forbid, we started building wealth. We started holding assets, properties, investment properties, holiday homes, investments. People own blocks of land that I know in Melbourne. There's nothing on them, but they've just invested in them for their children. And they don't want that. So, of course, they've taken lots of measures to take that back. The printing of money, the high inflation, the devaluation of your dollar, the covering up of GDP by bringing in millions and millions of migrants, and never mind that everyone's standard of living is dropping. And I think what makes me absolutely sick to my stomach about these people is that they highfalutin around. You know, if you look at the likes of Justin Trudeau and his new squeeze, the singer, oh my goodness, what's her name? The one who went into space, Katy Perry. Then they just swan around, you know, literally wealthier than movie stars, rock stars.
That
the same here. Anthony Albanese got married to his squeeze at the lodge.
Justin Trudeau's new squeeze is Katy Perry.
Huh?
Justin Trudeau's new squeeze is Katy Perry.
Yeah.
Oh. That's a step backwards from Russell Brand.
They're all
Who is
just
it?
rolling in it. Former state
Well, no,
Premier
really, was
Tony
that?
Andrews worth 70 to 90 million.
Maybe he's
There's
got a
no
big
question
muffin.
as to how he got hold of that money, but there should be, even as a former public servant. Were I a public servant, I would absolutely be open to audits about where money came from. Now, if they come from legitimate investments that were not made from insider knowledge as a bureaucrat, then that's absolutely fine. Knock yourself out, be as rich as you like. But you see, these people don't come from the real world.
No. Here's one for you. There's an office block, an office building in Queen Street, Melbourne. I can't remember what number street. Queen Street. And it's the housing co-op of Housing Choices. The CEO said, we can't. I'm not allowed to talk to. I've sent a couple of them messages on LinkedIn. Now I've been booted off LinkedIn. We're not getting booted off, we're all over the place. Only because I've told them they're a bunch of thieving bastards. Probably why they won't fix nothing in my house. Obviously, the taxpayers' money doesn't come to us. Not even going to them, it's going into servicing a percentage of the interest rate of the debt. That's where your money's going, guys. We're just borrowing money hand over fist, the government is. Every time there's an interest rate hike or whatever, and the rent will go up because the rates will go up. So the rent will go up, and interest rates go up, which means purchasing power goes down. At the same time as we'll get a rent assistance increase through Centrelink. We don't see it, and because it's based on the percentages, on the percentages equation, we're actually a little bit less each time left than what we had before we got the increase, and it all goes straight to Housing Choices. Now, I also just found out the other day, the Housing Choices doesn't pay rates. But somehow, there are properties owned by Homes Tasmania that have back rates owed on them because they're properties that have gone into rent to pay scenarios, so they're in joint ownership, so now there's rates owed on them. The tenants are trying to sell the properties, and now there's an argument over who pays the rates. Council don't care, they're selling the properties just to get the rates. So there's properties available where people are going to lose their properties, and whoever buys the properties are probably going to get them for the price of the rates. There's properties in Devonport that there's $10,000 worth of rates owed on them. If you go and pay that $10,000, you probably get the property. I've seen it done before. Now, who will buy these properties? You watch all this money that's all going to the CEOs of Housing Choices. You watch it because they're they're an administrative company that are handling the administration of the housing co-op of Homes Tasmania, Homes Victoria, which is Housing Tasmania, Housing Australia, the Housing Co-op of Australia, which is, they're in administration under Housing Choices. I think that happened because of mismanagement. Well, that's how you get Commonwealth-owned property into the hands of the state, and from the hands of the state into private ownership, without having to have referenda and without having to justify the fact that you gave them away. You run it at a loss, get the administrative companies to manage it. It goes tits up. But they've got all the money, so you're paying them to buy them. They'll just buy them back for cents on the dollar. And you can bet your left testicle, that Housing Choices is a subsidiary company of BlackRock Vanguard. It'll be another Larry Fink scam.
These people are career politicians, so it's not like a Trump where they were a businessman and a real estate person before. You don't get to be a career politician and end up worth $90 million. It just doesn't happen. And what's interesting is my daughter's learning about the Russian Revolution at college, and she was saying that as this wealth gap in Russia got bigger, because the majority of people were poor and most of them couldn't even read and write, what happened, and the reason the revolution happened, is that they started showing people pictures and photographs of them being crushed by the wealthy, and they were being told, this is you, this is happening to you, and they got mad. Now what's interesting is that if you live in Russia right now, and I know it's crazy because often Vladimir Putin sounds like he's talking more sense than our leaders, but hey, let's not trust that, right? Let's not trust anyone, to be frank.
There's a bit of indoctrination going on there, Nicola. My great-grandparents, my grandfather's parents, died in a Russian gulag in a work camp. She goes on to talk about work camps here shortly. The labour camp. What came after World War One, which was supposed to become the land of milk and honey. They couldn't feed them, so they worked, but they starved to death because they didn't have food to feed them. I've seen a photo. Mum managed somehow to get hold of the photo. I'd love to have all this stuff, but I don't talk to Mum. She's got some bad juju attached to her. Now, it was a horrible photo. They were forced to stand there and take photos and send them back. Looking like they were forced to look like they were happy. And you've never seen two sickly, skin and bone people stand there with a smile in your life, and that wasn't even wartime, it was after World War One. My grandfather was raised in an orphanage because of that, in Wales. They went there because of World War One. They went there to make money. It was supposed to be the land of milk and honey. Russia was going to be this great thing. But they just couldn't feed them. You can't feed all that many people with no agricultural prospects. That's why they want Ukraine back. Ukraine was Russia's breadbasket. The biggest problem that Russia has is food security. Without the Ukrainian land, they don't have it. further into Russia you go, the closer you start getting to Greenland and the Arctic. It's just too cold. Yeah.
I don't trust anyone anymore. If we trusted people, we wouldn't have safes, we wouldn't have door locks on cars, and we wouldn't have locks on our front doors. But so Russians don't have access to social media unless they have a VPN. You don't see all these raging influencers and social media people and commentators coming out of Russia, do you? No, they have to have a VPN and it's closely monitored. And that's exactly what Anthony Albanese and the Labour Party want here in Australia. Which I think is really, really concerning because, of course, they're also sending much of our tax dollars over to Ukraine. We don't know where it's ending up. It's obviously not going on weaponry. Not when you've got Zelensky's wife buying $4 million Bugatti motor vehicles. He's building a house in Israel. He's built a house in Florida. When I say house, I mean these things look like the Taj Mahal. But why would you be at war with Russia? Because we have to stop Russia coming, big bad Russia. But hey, let's be exactly like Russia. Let's put the boot on the head and say we don't want social media. And all of these Labour politicians are starting to lose their footing. And this should have started a long time ago. We've still got these bioweapons, mRNA, in every single pharmacy in Australia. It's absolutely appalling. The birth replacement rate isn't replacing us, so that's of great concern. But when these people are questioned in Senate estimates or, during chatting there in parliaments and stuff, they don't have answers for anything, and that's their job. And it's absolutely appalling. I mean, they're not fit for purpose, and yet they're earning wages. I think that the most successful year I had, there was a 6 in front of my salary, and I'm talking the most successful year as a television star. And it didn't last very long, believe me. That's what these people are earning, year in, year out, to be finance minister, foreign minister, to be the treasurer, to be the PM, even to be a state premier like the unelected Jacinta Allen. And what are they doing? Well, what they're doing is either not much or committing crime. So here's the powerhouse, Katy Gallagher, who is federally, on a national level, Australia's finance minister, and she's being asked a question about Australia's lowest economic growth on record. Katy Gallagher has done interviews over the years how she was really surprised that she did so well in her career because initially she was just brought in to bolster the amount of women that were in a party photograph for Labour for good optics on them being, them being fair with women in the party. And that suddenly then she was scooped up because they liked the way she looked in this photo. Well, it's all actually starting to make sense when you hear her response on record low economic growth in Australia. She just basically says, not my problem, and check in with the banks.
What is your response to the news today that the Reserve Bank of Australia is forecasting the lowest growth they ever have for the Australian economy?
I leave it to the Reserve Bank to make comment on the economy when it's I don't know what you're after there.
I don't know what you're after there. I think he's after an answer to his question. I'll just leave it to the Reserve Bank to tell you what's going on with the economy. Well, what are we paying you for then? Here again is powerhouse Katy Gallagher speaking in a Senate Community Affairs Legislation Committee with a senator from Victoria. And she's obviously not in a good mood this day. She always seems a bit testy, I have to say. They're not exactly jumping around with joy at having to do their job because probably their job is not really what they expected it to be. But she seems here to be being very sexist to this male senator from Victoria.
You've restarted,
let me just
fair
stop
enough.
you so you don't waste a line of questioning. I'm just giving you...
I love the mansplaining. I'm enjoying it.
You're loving what?
The mansplaining that's going on.
What
just talking me through how by not answering the question, by repeating processes which are not related to the question that I've asked.
What's mansplaining, Senator?
Well, it's the slightly patronising and condescending way that you're responding to my questions.
Well, I would suggest, Senator, that if you're putting the word man in front of some description of what I'm doing, you're doing that which I'm sure you're very much against, is making a sexist implication about how I'm conducting my role as
Well,
a man.
then the easiest way to do
Is that
it.
what you're saying, Senator?
Well, what I'm saying is that the way you've been responding to me has been patronising and condescending, and I have responded to that. So the easiest way to deal with this is not to have that way in responding to questions I've
Imagine the
asked.
reaction, Senator, if I said you were womansplaining. You're saying that I'm mansplaining.
Well, it is a term that's used when...
By rude senators.
What?
By senators seeking to make gender an issue. Stop being a hypocrite.
Well,
Conduct yourself appropriately.
The equivalent to mansplaining.
I'm sorry you're so
It's
offended by
waffling.
the use of the word. It is a word that's used. It's a
Yeah.
surprise that you're so shocked by the use of the word.
No, I'm just calling hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. Thy name is Labor.
These people are running the country of Australia, which is 32 times larger than England, is a powerhouse of energy resources. We've got someone there as finance minister who, by her own admission, was dragged into positions because she looked good in a photograph. I myself have looked good in photographs over the years. Maybe I should be dragged in so that we can actually get some bloody sense out of the bureaucracy. Here's another fantastical farce from those running Australia, that they have made the decision that guns are going to be taken off Australian warships that would likely be used were we called to battle with China. How can we be called to battle with China? Jacinta Allen, the unelected premier and paid more than Trump in Victoria, is actually in business in China with a company called Vic House, selling our beers, our ice creams.
If we're defenceless, I've been saying this the whole time, this is about getting our property, our resources, our minerals, and annexing Australia. We're being set up to be annexed exactly the same way as the United States annexed Hawaii back in 1893. Check that out. Look through the chronological flowchart on how that happened. Exactly the same.
Our face creams. And so this farce goes on, where we're now talking about taking guns off warships. Why? I don't know. Are we going to have some theatrical war where we only die on this side because, well, we've not got no guns on our ships, so we won't be killing anyone? I mean, what the hell is going on in Australia?
Verbal gymnastics to say that the reason you've decided to take all the
Well, mental gymnastics it takes just to listen to these bastards.
armaments off these 4 incredibly expensive ships is because you want to have enhanced lethality. But this is... I represent a party that doesn't want to take us to war with China. You all seem hot to trot to go to war with China and join Donald Trump. And then you want to go to war with China with ships that don't even have a gun on it. Like, it's incredibly doubly dangerous what you lot are doing. It's like going to a bar fight and...
All right, so now you've got a question because I think we're keen to move things around. Minister?
I think you know the quote about sarcasm being the lowest form of wit. Can I invite you
We'll name fucking come checking in the pissing competition.
They just say things like, I can't recall. I don't like your framing of that. It's sarcasm. Don't mansplain to me. I mean, what we are watching in the Australian bureaucracy is the greatest reality shit show the global south has ever seen. And it wouldn't be the reality shit show of Australian bureaucracy without digging in yet again to the latest on why the unelected Premier of Victoria has handed over $15 billion of our taxes as we're coming out of the stress of the engineered pandemic, of which they were also on board with, handing that over to bikie gangs, who in Victoria are gangsters.
The $15 billion Big Build corruption scandal has deepened, with the state's corruption watchdog pouring cold water on the Premier's claims she acted quickly. IBAC says Jacinta Allen did refer corruption allegations last year, but never gave it the powers it needed to act.
Pressure building over the Big Build scandal. Asked on 10 separate occasions, the Premier refuted allegations CFMEU corruption cost taxpayers $15 billion.
These claims are not well tested or properly founded.
Jacinta Allen still refuses to test the claims herself.
Do you think $15 billion is a lot of money? That is a figure that has been used in this context that has been found to be not well tested.
It's money backbenchers admit voters are asking about.
Do people raise the $15 billion with me? Yes, they do. And I talk to them about the steps that the Premier has outlined that we're taking.
Steps like this carefully composed letter to the state's corruption watchdog in 2024, asking them to investigate.
Used to figure that it's not been well tested. She said that. They're not answered. They're not an answer. You've got them go councilman. And you ask them what money's being spent on. On approved projects. What are they? To upgrade the Burnie CBD. Okay, so what are they? As part of the new Burnie Look project. So what are they? You know what I mean? I've been asking this question about all these different amounts of funding, same questions, same answers, but I still haven't been told exactly what. It's been a copious, like tens and hundreds of $1,000s on digital infrastructure. So what is it? I know, because I already know the answer. I just want them to tell the people. I want them to tell the people what it is. They don't want me telling them. I'm not the man. I'm not one of the council. I'm trying to get just throw them a freaking bone, will you? Tell them it's going towards the digital grid infrastructure for blockchain security. Some people will get that. Blockchain security is about blockchain surveillance, blockchain policing. How? Oh, it'd be totally secure, yeah. To Oracle, not to people. Oracle and Palantir, through Lockheed Martin, is hooking Australia up. So at the end of the day, all of these things, they're nothing. They're nothing. Pretty much all the video you watched and this radio show you listen to now, Substack radio thing you listen to now, it's actually nothing burgers. All this time you've been sitting here listening and watching them. It's important, yeah, but it still amounts to nothing. Why? It's like, if I rub some of this flavour off this here cheese, I've still got the cheese. It's like the hole in that cheese. It's nothing. But it's the hole in it that makes it a Cheezel. Otherwise it'd just be a Cheeto. The problem is far beyond government. Far beyond. However, let's look at it this way. You got a car manufacturer in another country. All of our car manufacturers are in another country. Look, Toyota's coming back, by the way. They'll be bringing EVs, I reckon. We got Toyota here as a dealership for a foreign manufacturing company. If nobody buys cars from Toyota, from the dealership, the dealership's not viable and it goes broke. So that deals with that link in the chain. Get rid of the link in the chain. They can't be used by them. It can't be sold garbage cars, rubbish, jack crap cars or whatever. If you don't buy them, if you stop buying bullshit from government, stop funding them, they cease to be relevant. They're not a viable company anymore, not a viable dealership. They're not selling it. We don't need government. We can still deal with the BRICS nations without relying on them scumbags. Everyone's fucking brainwashed, sucked in into thinking America's some great country, some great superpower. They've never actually been that much of a superpower. Not really. When did World War II start? 1939. When did it finish? 1945, 46. When did America enter World War II? Not until it was agreed upon for Japan to attack Pearl Harbor. It was agreed upon. And so the American people didn't want to enter the war, and the only way they could justify it, the only way that, was it Roosevelt at the time? I think. Don't quote me on that. Pretty sure it was Teddy. The only way they could justify it was if an attack was made on Australian soil, when they wasn't about to have it on Australian soil. They was happy to let Japan attack Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. They had a Navy base there. I think it's a bit funny that 2 hours prior to that happening, someone rang up the Navy base and told them to evacuate all the families. Someone with a conscience. Nobody knows who it was. That's what got them in the war. No, I reckon they stepped in and they fucking solved it all and scared Germany away. No, they didn't. Russia did. Russia did that. And then America scooped up all the mad scientists. They took some and we got some, and Russia ended up with a skull that turned out to not even be Hitler's. all that time they thought they were sitting on Hitler's skull. And no one knows what happened to Hitler, other than he went to Argentina. The skull that Russia had turned out to be a female skull. That wasn't even Hitler's wife. I think it may have been his servant.
Gate allegations on government work sites. IBAC rejected the request because it's never had the power to investigate, power it's been chasing for almost a decade, but Jacinta Allen has not provided. The opposition says it will expand the watchdog's powers.
This Premier continues to cover it up, or I will clean it up.
The opposition is drafting a second referral to the state's corruption watchdog over allegations Labor collected thousands of dollars in donations from bikie-linked firms, now facing police action. The Greens are pushing for a corruption overhaul of their own.
The Greens have done the government's homework for them, and we have laws ready to go this week.
And state political reporter Rochelle Brown joins us now with breaking news. Rochelle, Victoria's anti-corruption agencies have issued a please explain to the Premier.
Well, Mitch, the Victorian Ombudsman, IBAC and the Auditor General's Office are all calling for an overhaul of the way the state's integrity agencies are funded. In a nutshell, the government currently has the power to decide the budgets without explanation or oversight from the Parliament. The heads of those agencies say the lack of transparency risks undermining public trust. It's yet another blow for Jacinta Allen on an issue that won't go away.
That report from 7 News Melbourne. So this is what we're facing here in Australia. So in case you didn't get the gist of that, these bikie gangsters that work in construction, I know we've got international listeners, that sort of run all the construction sites in Victoria. You can't get anything done without employing their people. They've sort of got a stranglehold. Well, Jacinta Allen, the unelected Premier of Victoria, is married to a man who was once their second in command. And what seems to have been happening is crazy things like them getting paid double if it rains on them while they're working. Big, strong, tradie builders. Oh, no, not a bit of water. Not like the water you go home and put on you when you take a shower at the end of the day. No, not that kind of water. This is acid-laced water. My God, it probably is from the chemtrails. But if it rains on them, they get paid double, and other things, right? So what happens is she allows the taxpayer to be heisted of this money, and because it's extortion, it's clearly extortion, it's just ridiculous some of the things that are on the list. And then the people extorting it use some of it to fund their political campaigns. Oh, that's not round and round money laundering at all. And so many decisions these people make, not only do they not make sense, but we also don't get any information on it. For instance, I tweeted out last night, I'm really concerned about, do you remember when they were building the Westgate Tunnel? So for international listeners, we have the Westgate Bridge, which is a big suspension bridge, which...
So basically, it's all crooked and it all stinks, and we already know that, and everybody just keeps complaining year after year. See, I remember when I was a kid, Dad owned a business. My grandfather was self-employed, he was a house painter, and Granddad's right into it. Kind of like I am. I'm not into it, I don't like it, but I actually don't. I'd rather be in a position where I wouldn't have to worry about it, to be honest. That's the funny thing. People mistake people who are politically minded for being people that are into politics and like politics or something. No, politicians like politics. People like myself, we hate politics. I can despise it. And the politicians. For a good reason. And we would rather not have to worry about it. But the problem is those of you who think that we're into politics, you're lemmings. You'll fall for anything because you don't stand for anything. And because you'll fall for anything, someone's got to stand for something. Let's look at it this way. If it wasn't for people like me in the world, imagine fucking where we would be. That's a scary thought, isn't it? Hey Lily, don't you agree? Where'd your sister go? No. Yeah, if it wasn't for people like me in the world, who are annoying pains in the arse, imagine where we would be if they were just let to run carte blanche and there wasn't people like myself and many others who were willing to even be embarrassed and make asses of ourselves, to annoy people, find ourselves in front of judges and shit all the time. Harassed by police. Willing to even stick our neck out in public when we see to call out the police being dicks. The Stasi, what are you doing, mate? You alright? Why are you waving magic fairy wands around at people? Is there a robot running around or something? You're trying to find the person who's made out of metal. How's it going, mate? Here's my boy. Once they got fucking all these fucking iRobot people running around, what good's a metal detector going to do them? Everyone in the streets made a metal, boss. Yeah, it's my skeleton. They'll just peel their skin off. Look. Cut my eyeballs.
Hey, Garment.
No, it's a worry.
Wasn't one scene from Terminator?
No, and here's the thing too. Everyone goes, I do not consent. And people think that oh God, I remember the movement that went around to go, when you're voting and they go, just write, no suitable candidate, do not consent. What? And what's that going to do? Get your name scratched off. So, they don't care about the votes. Okay? They actually don't care. The votes don't matter. It's getting your name scratched off that matters. This many people participated. So, as long as they got enough names marked off, they can say anything. They can just do a couple of basic mental gymnastics and mathematics and say whatever, as long as it matches up with however many people that we're led to believe live in that state. I'm telling you now that population isn't what they tell us what it is. That's not even conspiracy theory. That's basic mathematics. Like we say, go back to China. How long did they have the one baby policy? Let's find out. Like that shit's bananas. How long did Ina have the one baby policy? Thinking. China implemented its one-child policy for approximately 35 to 36 years, from 1980 to the end of 2015. It was officially introduced in 1979 and implemented nationwide in 1980 to curb rapid population growth. The policy was relaxed to a two-child policy in January 2016 to combat an ageing population. China doesn't have the population they say they have. There was someone from China crunched the numbers on it and it wasn't even close. And they've been crunching the numbers everywhere around the world, just on the based on the births and deaths records, public records. Over it was like a 20-year period or something. And they're like, well, 50. It might have been a lifespan. Might have been two generation period, something like that. And well, she's a bit of a mathematician and a statist. whatever they call them, people that run statistics. Statistician. And the world's probably closer to about 5 billion, not 8 billion. So there's about 3 billion people in the world that don't actually exist. They can swing any election anywhere they want, whenever they want. They just get AI to run the numbers now. Why vote? Why pay it? Why pay taxes? I'm going to blame the cat for that one. If you're going to keep playing the silly game, they're going to keep rolling the dice, and they'll always get the get out of jail free and community chest, receive $200 off each player. They're going to get that all day long, and you're always going to get the do not pass go, do not collect $200, go directly to jail. That's just how the game is. The only way you're going to defeat it is to stop playing the stupid fucking game. Night, God bless you.